Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Only money.
When it comes to adapting a Hollywood movie into a video game, to say the bar is low would be a hilarious understatement. Such endeavors often ended up being little more than an obvious cash grab by big publishers who didn't recognize the medium as anything more than a technological avenue for more toy sales. That said, no film cashed in on more methods of marketing and multimedia reach than Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. A movie that saw not one, not two, but 9 different tie-in video games. Of those 9 games, however, only one of them was a direct adaptation of the film itself, a fact which the game boasts by sporting the exact same name as the movie with no extra or alternate subtitles. This particular game is simply called Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace, and does its best to take the player through a playable version of nearly every sequence from the film. No, seriously, I can hardly believe how good of a job this game does at sticking to the beats from the movie. Of course, those sequences are altered significantly to suit making each scenario something playable in a video game format. But I honestly found all of the changes to be welcome, as it was fun to play through an alternative version of the events we saw in the movie. Although this was published by LucasArts, a studio called Big Ape Productions is actually credited for the development of the game itself, although I'm not sure if they handled all of the production or only parts of it. I say this because the CGI cutscenes we see throughout the game look very similar to the ones seen in other LucasArts games from that time period, like Shadows of the Empire or Masters of Terras Kasi. It was developed and released for Microsoft Windows as a PC game and released on May 18th, 1999, just 2 days after the film's theatrical release. Then, roughly 4 months later, on September 14th, the game was ported to and released on the Sony PlayStation, which is the version I'll be playing and showing footage of for this video. Although I owned and played the PC version as a kid, that's the one I always see people talking about due to its graphical superiority. So I wanted to hone in on the PS1 version for this video and talk about what this port has to offer. The gameplay on offer here is a very strange hodgepodge of mix and match mechanics that make the experience a little difficult to pin down. It's an action-adventure game with platforming, dialogue interactions, sandbox exploration, and puzzle solving, all playable via a top-down camera perspective. There is very little information on this game's development, which leaves me with very little to say about what engine it's made on. What I can say is that it appears to be technologically competent. With that out of the way, let's take a look back at this video game adaptation of Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace.
I have a bad feeling about this.
We open in the waiting room of the Trade Federation control ship, much like the film did, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan discussing their purpose in the Naboo system with the Viceroy. Expectedly, poison gas begins to flood the chamber, but that's when something unexpected happens. We have a dialogue tree interaction with the protocol droid in this room. This matters because why did they bother to put this function in the game? The truth is, I don't care why they did it, I love it. Of course, this interaction didn't happen in the film, but it sets a clear precedent about what players are in for. This isn't just going to be a game of playing through levels and killing things the whole time. Just like the film, the doors open to let Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan burst out in spectacular fashion as they slice the battle droids to pieces, although it's quite a bit clunkier in this version. Now, it took me quite a few levels of playing to actually get the combat down, as you'll see, so if you're wondering why I'm not deflecting these blaster bolts, it's because I didn't figure out how until Mission 5. It's actually really cool to get to see these hallways and play through this sequence to see what these areas of the ship actually looked like beyond what we were shown in the movie. This is one of the smaller levels in the game. They actually end up getting longer and more open as you play, but so far Alright, well, we can still press on. If anything, this helps us slip past our pursuers. Well, there goes our ride. The fact that we can actually witness this scene from an entirely different perspective via this game is actually so cool, and I very much appreciate this little detail. Meanwhile, we have to make our way through these ventilation shafts. At this point in my playing, I still had no idea how to really handle this game's combat, so I was getting slaughtered. No worries though, as I do begin to figure it out here shortly. That's right, we're going tactical commando with Obi-Wan doing Jedi side rolls while laying down a barrage of blaster fire. This is completely ridiculous, but I still cannot seem to get enough of it. Let's take this generator offline real quick. Alright, now all we need to do is find Qui-Gon and get off this ship.
Obi-Wan!
Again, we don't exactly see Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan boarding these troop transports in the movie, so getting to play through this sequence is really interesting, especially since the developers are flexing their game's capacity for moving parts via button press. For a PS1 game, this is genuinely impressive, and we haven't even seen the last of it yet. Oh, here comes trouble. Taking out these droids, we can utilize this hovercraft to sneak aboard the troop transport and make our way to the surface. I'm not even going to front. These CGI cutscenes are so utterly unnecessary for a game based on a movie that already shows the things the cutscene is trying to emulate. Even so, their aged aesthetic paired with the novelty of this little title makes their inclusion feel special in a way that the developers literally could not have foreseen. I still love them. Anyway, we're on Naboo now, specifically the planet's swamps. I actually remember playing this level as a kid. I hated it back then, but playing it now, I'm actually a little bit charmed by it. I can really see what they were going for, and since the swamp sequence in the movie is so short-lived, getting to see more of what the Naboo swamps feel like is a treat for fans like me. And the game even has swimming mechanics. I mean, this might seem menial compared to modern games, and it really doesn't play a role in this game at all beyond this level and one other one, but the fact that it's here is just very cool to me. Things like this weren't super common in PS1 games, so I'm always impressed when I see this level of environmental interactivity. There's a lot of core mechanics introduced to us in this level actually, like the... Wait, did you hear that?
Who are you?
Lisa Jar Jar Binks.
Jokes aside, Jar Jar plays a minuscule role in this game, so if you've got an issue with him, don't worry, you'll barely see him. I personally don't mind the character in general, but I'm aware some people can't stand him, though that's another topic altogether. Doesn't matter what I think of him though, because the developers clearly hate him.
Misa clumsy, but Misa still help.
Something pretty cool about this level is that it serves as a genuine vertical slice for the game. I'm pretty sure every single major gameplay mechanic you'll encounter throughout the rest of the game shows up in this one level. So you will know based on this level alone if you're about to enjoy the rest of the game or not. Every single mission that follows this are just variations of everything we do in this level. Some are more combat focused and others are more puzzle focused. This one is a great mix of everything, which is good because the next level tones it all down quite a bit.
Obi-Wan, over here. I see you've met John. We need to find safe haven until these droids pass by.
The Moto Grande safe place would be Otoganga. 'Tis where I grew up. 'Tis a safe city.
Can you take us there?
It's embarrassing, but might been banished. Might forgotten the bosses would do terrible things if me going back there.
You hear that? That is the sound of 1,000 terrible things heading this way.
Your point is well seen. This way, hurry. My warning yous, Gungans no liking outlanders. Don't expect a warm welcome.
Getting into Auto Gunga, the expected dialogue occurs of Qui-Gon reasoning with Boss Nass about getting to Theed, except this time we have to go rescue Jar Jar from jail as Obi-Wan, and it's interesting. Before I talk about that, I gotta take a second to applaud the game design a little bit. I know it's following the plot threads of the film, so they kinda had to do it this way, but opening on an action combat-centric level and progressing into a level that introduced more platforming and puzzle solving, which then leads to a totally puzzle-focused level, is brilliant in my opinion. After this, the game just cycles through variations of the aforementioned level types. As for Auto Gunga, it takes what I'd say is the second highest amount of liberties for the sake of gameplay inclusion as we see in the game, the first being Coruscant.
I'm trying to sell these electro-binoculars.
Wandering around this underwater city and interacting with the Gungans makes for a unique experience that you can't really find in any other Star Wars game. I'd say this is one of the things that makes this game worth playing actually, just for the novelty of walking around the city and experiencing it like this. These platforms going up and down like this is, again, just showing off what they were capable of pulling off in this game at the time. It's great, I love it. For a game that insists on not letting us look up, it does have a surprising amount of verticality. As mentioned before, this game relies heavily on platforming since there's no real enemies here unless you make them, which of course I did make them by not bothering to figure out the correct way to handle getting around these guards, so I ended up just killing a bunch of them. But I'm pretty sure that's standard practice for this game, so I wasn't worried about it. I do love how we can see all of the fish moving around outside of the bubbles we're in. This is such an awesome level of love and care for a movie tie-in game. Anyway, there's Jar Jar. Let's get out of here.
Must warn the Queen of the Trade Federation's attack. Beyond this bridge is the city of Theed and the Queen's palace. Follow me, Obi-Wan.
This here's Big Mechaniques. Ouch time.
Okay, so Qui-Gon is dead. A tank just shot him. Not the bridge, that hit him directly. The first thing that happens is a tank shoots Qui-Gon and blows up the bridge with Jar Jar still on it. I don't remember that from the movie. Either way, that leads us into a platforming section, and this is the only other level in the game where the swimming mechanic will matter, but they did make great use of it. This level takes place in the Gardens of Theed, Naboo's capital city, and it's actually visually spectacular. I am aware of how much better this all looks on the PC version, of course, but there's something about these chunky PS1 graphics that really appeals to me. I guess because I grew up around these kinds of games and in the era of battle droids and whatnot, but I can't get enough of this aesthetic. We even get to navigate a maze garden while fighting droids. It's great. I do need to say that this game is actually really challenging. Like, it's mostly fair except for 2 instances, but overall it's a pretty difficult game to play. This comes down to the controls and lack of health items throughout the levels. Most levels have a precisely placed number of health items from start to finish, with an idea of when you will need more health if you're playing competently. Some levels are more generous with these than some are less generous. I would have liked to see a bit more playtesting for these levels to dial in this placement a bit more, because there are some sections that need a few more health pickups, particularly an escort mission, which is next actually.
I am glad to see that you have survived. The Trade Federation has taken complete control of Theed. We must escort the Queen to safety.
The hangar is some distance from here. There's a passage underneath the palace. This way.
This is it, the hardest mission in the game, and arguably the worst. Its competition being the Coruscant level, which I'm getting to that. Escort missions are pretty awful, regardless of the game, and this is universally well known. But this game is especially not suited for it. Trying to protect the Queen with the control scheme we have is a terrible experience. Guess what she does when she starts taking fire? She falls to the ground and covers her head as blaster fire rips her to shreds. She doesn't run and hide or take cover or anything. She's not even the real Queen. We should just leave her here and go, to be honest. Sometimes she stops and waits for us to check if the next area is safe to proceed, but other times she just runs ahead and will not stop or run back or anything. She'll just drop to the ground and cover her head while screaming, "Help me!
Help me!"
The only thing to offset this design is the enormous amount of health she has, so she can just tank 100 blaster bolts before finally keeling over. But unfortunately, I lost a lot of that health bar near the start of this mission, so it was very stressful near the end. Because they start rolling out droideka patrols, and taking those things out without dying yourself is a serious challenge. It's so bad at times that near the end of this level actually doesn't even feel fair. As you try and fight off the droids ahead of you, the game spawns in an entire patrol right behind you, and you can't account for them because they spawn right around the corner after you cross a threshold. So you have to trigger the aggression of the droids ahead of you and then turn around immediately to go try and fight the freshly spawned group behind you, which includes a droideka. This is actually the most combat heavy level in the game, and it's for the worst because it's painful to try and play. This is one of only 2 places I soft locked myself from progressing due to the Queen's health being so low and just turned on invincibility to beat the level. Finally, with that out of the way, we're able to board the Queen's shuttle and head to the next level, which left me in a deeply conflicted state. It's pretty well known on this channel how little I appreciate the frequent usage of the planet Tatooine in the Star Wars universe. I understand how much it probably eases development time to make assets for a barren desert world, and I also recognize the significance of the world to the films. That said, I usually get frustrated when other media in the universe opts to go to Tatooine because it's supposed to be a backwater nothing planet whose only notable trait is being the planet that Jabba the Hutt operates from.
The Hutts are gangsters.
So the fact that arguably the best 3 missions of this game all take place on Tatooine was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. For the next 3 levels, we are given control of Qui-Gon as we wander through the streets of Mos Espa trying to get our hands on a T-14 hyperdrive generator, a part that no one in town seems to have except for our favorite Troydarian, Watto. When I say that's what we're doing, I mean we are literally just walking around doing side quests to help the residents of the town and trade parts. So why did I say these levels are the best of the game? Well, I don't really know if I can explain it, but I just felt like there's something so satisfying about getting to walk around and interact with people and do side quests as a Jedi in a more sandbox RPG setting like this. The first thing that happens is the game lets us fight off some Tusken raiders between us and the town. These things are really aggressive and want us dead, and probably also to assault us and enslave us, and maybe, depending on the tribe, even eat us through a straw.
I hate them!
So I slaughtered them like animals. Finally getting into the city of Mos Espa, we see a host of friendly NPCs to interact with, and the way they were able to make this little city feel so lived in on a PS1 game is so cool to me. I took it for granted back then, but I've played PS2 games that couldn't manage to make a city feel lived in like this. There's no shortage of exotic aliens to see and interact with, including Teemto Pagalis, for some reason. He's a reoccurring character in this game with multiple lines of interactable dialogue, and none of the other racers are, yet Teemto shows up multiple times. Unfortunately, Rats Tyrell does not appear. Want me to make that death scene way worse? That's a real deleted scene, by the way. He actually says goodbye to his wife and several newborn children before the race, and then dies shortly thereafter. No wonder they cut it. Anyway, this level will have quite a bit of aimless walking, trying to get your bearings on where you even are, and no shortage of thugs trying to sprint up to you and shove you, following it with a threat. They never actually deliver on these threats, and you can typically avoid taking damage by simply backing up after they initiate their shove animation. Then, when we eventually find Anakin, he makes us chase him through a death trap junkyard, complete with whatever the hell that thing is. Looks like it crushes garbage or something, but right now it's trying to crush us. And then a bunch of local Jawas try to murder us for reasons unknown to me, so I
slaughtered them like animals.
And here I thought Jawas were typically pretty friendly. The rest of this level is made up of handling little side quests and finding people who will trade parts that we can find for parts Anakin needs in order to repair his pod racer. Which, actually, there's a couple of different ways to accomplish this. You don't have to rely on a single method of who to trade with. Depending on what you do and for who, you'll get a variety of different parts that you can trade with various NPCs across the town. Also, we have to fight and kill this thing. What is this thing, you ask? Well, I don't know. I tried to find information on what it is, but no one seemed to know, and guides always simply referred to it as a beast or monster. Before you suggest it, no, this can't be a cliff wampa. In my retrospective on Shadows of the Empire, I noted the fact that it was very odd to find wampas on a desert planet when we really only saw them on Hoth in the films. As it turns out, this was accounted for, and I simply didn't do enough research because game director John Knowles explained why it's there. He's quoted as saying, quote, "The cliff wampa is actually the result of Imperial bioengineering. The Empire was so impressed by this powerful creature, who you'll remember did maul several of their vaunted stormtroopers on Hoth, that they managed to capture some and adapt them to various environments to be used almost like a vicious guard dog," end quote. This means that it's not native to the planet Gaul where we saw it in Shadows of the Empire, and this can't be one because the Empire doesn't even exist yet. So, what is this thing? Most of the wildlife on Tatooine tend to be scaly and reptilian, so since this isn't a cage like this, it might not be, and actually probably isn't from Tatooine. So I'm accepting theories as to the identity of this creature in the comments. Go crazy, lore nerds. With the parts for Anakin's pod racer on hand, we're ready to make our way to the Mos Espa arena where we can prepare for the big race. Alright, so we've reached the arena, and Darth Maul can be spotted watching us from afar menacingly before we get started here. This is a shorter mission, but a lot happens here. Before we can go meet the others to watch the race, Qui-Gon has to go strike a deal with Jabba the Hutt to borrow the money for the bet he's making with Watto. Which isn't accurate to the film at all, since Qui-Gon didn't bet any money on the race. He just wagered his ship against Anakin's freedom and the hyperdrive generator. This is pretty out of character anyway, as I don't think Qui-Gon would have been trying to borrow money from a Hutt if he could help it. Actually, he was the loose cannon Jedi, so I don't know, maybe. Either way, Jabba immediately tries to kill us by dropping us into an arena and making us fight for his entertainment. As for what it is we're fighting, again, I'm not sure. The guides just refer to him as Jabba's champion, but I'm not sure what this thing is supposed to be. He's too big to be a Gamorrean, and this game is actually notorious for the absence of Gamorreans anyway. Well, we kill the thing and head out into the cantina where we find Teamto having a drink. From here, we have to find Watto to make our bet, but before we can get to him, we have to buy this guy and his Ithorian friend a jury juice. Then we link up with Watto, place our bet, and head out to see Anakin before the race. All is well until this little creature comes running up and takes Anakin's ignition capacitor. He's gonna need that thing, so we have to chase it down as it runs us through a host of Tusken Raiders trying to kill us before finally leading us straight into a trap.
You're looking for Anakin's ignition capacitor. Well, you'll have to go through me if you want it.
Man, I don't remember this from the film. Who's this scary looking monster? Well, Qui-Gon makes him one with the Force, and we get Anakin's ignition capacitor back from him. Right away, it's clear this was all being set up by Watto to try to keep him from winning the race. Not this time though, because we straight up just kill this dude. And with that done, all we have to do is sit back and watch Anakin win the race. After Anakin wins, seemingly the entire town lines up to wave goodbye and see us off. I mean, look at all these people. Oh well, we've got places to be, so we head into the desert back to the Queen's ship. And on the way, we get ambushed by a bunch of these DRK-1 Dark Eye probe droids. I manage to fight them off and get back on track when suddenly, Darth Maul literally jumps down and starts flailing his blade at us wildly. This is our first example of blade combat, and it's insane. I do survive, but barely, because trying to play this game's melee combat is very unpredictable. Thankfully, there's a med kit here for us to heal up before finishing our battle and jumping aboard the Queen's ship as it leaves. Ah, Coruscant. The whole planet is one big city. Fans of the channel are well aware by now that I love when the Star Wars universe takes us to Coruscant. There's so much potential here, especially in a game like this that gives us so much sandbox potential. Oh man, I'll bet it'll be something cool like exploring the Jedi Temple as Anakin or Obi-Wan, getting to see more of where they train, and
Obi-Wan and I must present Anakin to the Jedi Council.
Very well. Captain Panaka and I will be quite safe, I'm sure. It's only a short air taxi ride to the Senate. Thank you for your help. May the Force be with you.
Take care, Your Highness. May the Force be with you.
We must reach Senator Palpatine's chambers as soon as possible.
Come along, Anakin. Your destiny awaits.
Did my game glitch? Or nope, I'm playing as Panaka. What is this? I know for a fact none of this happened in the film. They were literally met by Palpatine upon arrival. Not to mention, how are we nearing the end of the game and only just now leaving the perspective of one of the Jedi? This is the only mission where we play as Panaka, which is cool as an idea. I like Panaka as a character and would be open to seeing more of his character, but it feels so out of nowhere here. Not to mention this mission is really bad. They managed to take one of the most interesting planets in the universe and make the worst mission of the game on it. We get to do some thrilling things like trying to sell our electro binoculars.
Hello, friend. Can I help you?
I'm trying to sell these electro binoculars.
They appear to be in good order. They aren't stolen, are they?
No, I am the legal owner of these electro binoculars, I assure you.
Well, in that case, I'm willing to offer 100 Republic credits for the pair. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, thank you. I hope you enjoy these.
Or moving crates around.
We have to get out of here.
Lots of moving crates around, actually. Like, this one puzzle requires so much crate moving and wastes so much time for no reason other than to pad the mission length of an otherwise very short mission. When we're not doing that, we're fighting off hordes of thugs attempting to kill us. At least this little cantina sequence looks pretty cool, and we get these really neat little aliens to talk to. Lastly, we end up going through these sewer areas where a bunch of homeless people are holed up underneath the Senate chambers, which is admittedly a really neat little detail to show in this level, but after that, it's done. It's a really short mission, honestly, and a big waste of potential where we could have played as Obi-Wan in the Jedi Temple doing some side quest stuff with Anakin or something. Really, just imagine how cool this game would be if we got to actually walk around some parts of the temple and interact with a Jedi or two. Maybe they weren't allowed to go that route or thought the game needed more combat, but I think this was the wrong move, personally. I do need to give the game props for managing to make its most enjoyable missions on Tatooine and its worst mission on Coruscant.
Good job.
There's only 2 levels left, and they combine to adapt the epic climax of the film in what I'd call a spectacular but heavily flawed fashion. We start as Obi-Wan, entering the hangar when Darth Maul makes his iconic appearance, forcing the 2 Jedi to don their sabers and prepare to engage in combat. Just before this happens, however, the game cuts to a different perspective, giving us control of Padme Amidala leading the assault to reclaim her palace. I am actually okay with this, as her role in retaking the palace was critical to the film, but seemed to have a little less screen time than the Anakin space battle or Gungan battlefield scenes. So letting fans get to see a little more of that sequence is not only interesting, but a great choice for this game in my opinion. This level also reuses the same map from the 5th mission, so it made for a great use of resource management on the developer's part. Also, playing this level as Padme is easier than it was as Obi-Wan because we don't have to escort a defenseless character the whole time. Panaka is with us, but he's armed and seems to have plenty enough health, so it was never really an issue. Although I will say that if you haven't kind of mastered this game's controls by this point, you are going to struggle to get through this mission because I had to have a heavy reliance on when to hit the dodge button, when to use which weapon, and when to just try and shoot enemies before they noticed me. Also, you need to be saving regularly. I was saving every 2 or so minutes and across multiple slots. After you make it to a certain point in the map, the game switches your perspective back over to Obi-Wan as you and Qui-Gon try to take on Darth Maul. And despite the game's very finicky and inconsistent saber combat, it's hard to mess up such a cool set piece. I mean, come on, this is one of the coolest sequences in movie history, do not at me. The fight doesn't go on for very long though until the perspective shifts back over to Padme again as we continue the reclamation of Theed Palace. This shifting back and forth will be a constant for the rest of the game, by the way, as that's how they opted to adapt the finale. The rest of Padme's scene for this mission is just pushing your way to the palace for the infiltration. For the duel, however, the game is not only determined to show you every scene from the film, but to add in a host of other scenes that for sure did not happen. I'll get to that. We're on the last mission now, and this mission alone took me a little over an hour to beat. It is quite long, and a lot of that is due to the large amount of puzzle solving demanded of the player on both Padme and Obi-Wan's sections. We start with Padme, however, as we need to attain a red key card and free a host of trapped Naboo security guards. To make things worse, the front door is not an immediately apparent option. We can actually avoid this situation by pushing this crate over and activating a hidden passage that lets us access the room they're being kept in so we can grab the red keycard we need. And after that, it's back to the Darth Maul fight. I think my biggest issue here is that they scattered a handful of battle droids on these balconies, feasibly as a means of spicing up the gameplay, but I kind of felt like it ruined the tension of the sequence. I mean, this is a significantly impressive level they've designed, and it's got a serious ambient atmosphere to it. Just listen to the droning background noise. The only sound is the blades clashing in the distance, and it gets ruined every time we hear a blaster shot go off, which isn't the end of the world, and I can appreciate them trying to ensure players got as much content as they could stuff into the game. That said, sometimes less is more. Going back to Padme, we get a long hallway sequence that really just ends up being just keeping our distance and spamming repeater rounds in the general direction of anything that resembles a droid. Which then leads us to another crate puzzle and into the main hall. Back to Obi-Wan again, and this section is where the game really doubles down on the platforming elements. I was pretty good at platforming in this game, and even I was struggling to make it work in this section. After this, we get our last real puzzle of the game, where we need to move a crate to access the control room for these energy conduits. Moving the conduits around does allow us access to the next section, where we can finally catch up with Qui-Gon. But not before the game swaps perspectives back to Amidala again, as we tackle one final wave of battle droids before breaking into the throne room and confronting the Viceroy. Then we're back to Obi-Wan again for the final time, finally catching up to Qui-Gon and... well, I mean, you know how this plays out.
Die, Jedi, die.
I'm gonna be real with you. I was so low on health at this point in the game, and the level does not offer any health pickups that I could find before this confrontation, and I really didn't want to replay this whole level again, so I just cheated my way to infinite health so I could get this over with. But I mean, it was a climactic duel. And there you have it, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace for the Sony PlayStation. Man, I remember really loving this game as a kid, but I don't think I ever beat it until doing so for this video. I remember getting to Tatooine several times, and I can at least remember getting to Coruscant, and maybe the last battle, but I don't remember ever actually beating it. I had the PC copy back then, and as far as I could tell, the two games are nearly identical experiences, though the PC version obviously looks better. It's a really weird little game, and I'm not sure I've ever played anything like it before. The combat isn't great, and the sandbox aspects, although fun, are more what I'd call half-baked. The game doesn't really do anything super well, but it does so many things interestingly enough to make the game feel like an overall rewarding time. I enjoyed playing it even now for the most part. There were a few minor annoyances here and there, but overall, I think it makes a great little companion piece to the film it's adapting. And now that it's readily available on modern consoles like the PS4 and 5, it's easier than ever for you to get your hands on it and try it out for yourself. If anything you saw was interesting and you want to sink into some prequel-era Star Wars content, then, I mean, you could really do worse than this one. And I seriously mean that. You really could do worse than this one. Although I've had plenty of positive things to say about the game here, it was not received quite as well on release. Looking back now shows an aggregate score of 54% for the PS1 release, and a moderately more generous score of 62% for the PC one. Which just about sums up the overall reception to the game in general. The PC port was reviewed on the lower end of favorable, while the PS1 version got treated just a bit harsher. I will say that a lot of the negative comments I saw were mentioning the game Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 as a comparison, stating that this title paled in comparison to that one, which, as a well-known fan of that game, feels a bit odd. Their releases were years apart and their gameplay is totally different. The only commonality here is the Star Wars moniker. Regardless of that though, critics were using the Phantom Menace's failure to match up to what Dark Forces 2 had accomplished as a point of criticism, so take that how you will, I guess. As for me, I still think that The Phantom Menace is a great time, offering up a unique take on the events of the film that's made for fans of the series to jump in and enjoy. From the janky combat to the simple puzzle solving, it's pretty clear there's nothing groundbreaking about this game. It's just a Star Wars game letting you play through the events of the movie it was made for. That's all it wanted to be, that's all it advertised itself as, and that's more than enough for me. Thanks for tuning in and watching to the end of this video. If you couldn't tell, I love this game. I played it a lot as a kid, and going through it again now was such a blast. You don't see these kinds of weird little experimental games like this anymore. If you enjoyed the video, I'd ask that you leave a like and drop a comment. Not only does this really help me in the algorithm, but I also just really like being able to interact with you guys about these old games. Of course, if you want to see more content like this from me in the future, then subscribe to the channel. I'm always finding old games to talk about, so stick around. Members of the channel get early access to most of my videos, along with tons of member-exclusive content like live streams and special videos. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video, but until then, that's all I've got for you.